Thank you for joining us this week on Strange Pathways. I am your host, Scott Mort. I have had a fantastic weekend. It's been absolutely beautiful. It was there is a simple joy in just walking outside, cutting the lawn, trimming around the weeds, making everything look very, very nice. And that's exactly what I did this weekend. Enjoyed some quality time with my wife, Ariana. We went and got sushi. I'm a big fan of shrimp tempura, and she is the one that's turned me into that fan. We went and got sushi, went to the local graveyard, and just sort of relaxed in the graveyard. Had dinner. It was a wonderful time. May 23rd, 1964. Burgh Marsh in England. Firefighter Jim Templeton wanted to have a pleasant afternoon. Walk around, take a few photos, take his wife and his 5-year-old daughter Elizabeth just for a nice day. Now Templeton and his family, they hiked up this grassy hill 8 miles west of their home in Carlisle. Beautiful sunny Saturday afternoon. And he was snapping a few photos of his daughter Elizabeth in her new dress. He had a Kodak SLR. And it was a beautiful, beautiful day. The only thing that he noticed that was a little unusual was that the cows and the sheep that normally would have been in the field were kind of all bunched in a corner on the far side of the marsh. So he has his daughter Elizabeth pose on a hillside, and it's a cute little photo. She's got a bunch of flowers in her hands, and the dress is very pretty. But just behind her, you can see what looks all the world like a man in a spacesuit. White, black face visor. And whenever he first looks at this, Templeton, he's not quite sure what to make of it. The pharmacist that had developed the photos for him looked at it and he said, some idiot ruined shots of your daughter. This would have been the best one. Now, his wife hadn't seen anything. He hadn't seen anything. So the spaceman only shows up in one of the 3 photos of his daughter. Templeton wants to understand what's going on. So he shows the photos to the police. He actually sends the picture to Kodak. And even they're looking at it going like, yeah, this is weird. So they examine it. And they're looking for faulty film stock. They're looking for tampering, hoaxing. They find none of that. The photo is pronounced to be genuine. Kodak was so intrigued by this picture, they offered a reward of free film for a year to any person who could solve the mystery of the Solway Firth Spaceman. The Burgh Marsh, the Solway Firth as it's also known, is a hotbed of UFO activity. A lot of the locals around the marsh believe this is because of the nuclear power plant nearby. Templeton himself had told reporters that he had heard of the UFOs, but he'd not seen anything like that. Some time after the photos were taken, 2 men wearing dark suits pulled up to the firehouse where Templeton worked in a black Jaguar. They referred to themselves by numbers instead of names, and they claimed to be agents of the government. They wanted Templeton to take them to the site where he'd snapped the photo of his daughter and the anomaly behind her. 5 miles. 5 miles was the drive. And for the entire 5 miles, Jim Templeton was asked a series of increasingly bizarre questions. Questions about the weather, the behavior of the birds, behavior of other animals. They get back to Burgh Marsh, back to the grassy hill. These men in black try to convince Templeton that he'd photographed nothing more than an ordinary man. Templeton refused to make the admission, and these men in black, they got very angry. They storm off, and Templeton has to walk the 5 miles back to work. As he's walking this 5 miles, he's kind of like going over in his head everything that would happen. As he's walking the 5 miles, he's kind of going over in his head all the questions he's been asked. And he starts to realize one of the questions they asked him was, "Where did you see the second spaceman?" Templeton had never seen a second spaceman. A second roll of film that Templeton had sent to Kodak a few months later was returned with some of the negatives missing. They were photos taken that day, that very day, on the marsh. Templeton concluded, maybe correctly, maybe incorrectly so, that these photos would have revealed something else. It gets a little bit stranger. The editor of a local newspaper requested to borrow the negative of the photo that Templeton had taken so that he could send a copy of it to another newspaper halfway around the world in Australia. They wanted to compare notes. According to eyewitness reports, on the same day, on the very same day that Jim Templeton took his picture, there was a rocket launch in Woomera, Australia, that had to be aborted. 2 automatic survey cameras caught a pair of large, white space-suited men walking around the launch pad. The very same day. Remember, the photo at this point had not reached Australia. It hadn't even been developed yet. Templeton, in his own words, described the incident as he heard it. He said, quote, "They saw the monitors. Somebody was in the firing area, and, of course, the countdown was stopped. They searched the area. Nobody to be found, not a soul. And it was put down to a technical fault, but it was exactly the same type of man, same dress, same figure, same size as the picture that was taken over in the Berg Marsh." If you want a little bit more weirdness, the Woomera, Australia space program, this project that they were doing, this was Project Blue Streak. The rocket to be used in the launch was manufactured just a few miles from Berg Marsh. Australian reporters wanted to see this footage. Out of all the canisters of film taken during the entire Blue Streak project, 1 canister of film was missing. 1 single canister. Thousands upon thousands of feet of film. And the only film missing is of the space-suited men. It wasn't the only time that some strange entity stopped a launch at Woomera. There was another one. A white being was spotted on security cameras. The Blue Streak rocket was finally launched on June 5th, 1964. But whatever the connection was, if there was a connection, still unknown. 3 weeks later, Big Sur, California, another strange entity is filmed by a USAF team filming an Atlas rocket. It was very similar to the Blue Streak rocket. They were both ICBMs. There is footage of an alien ship beaming lights at the tip of the rocket's warhead 2 times. The commanding officer was questioned by two men in black. What I find truly fascinating about this case, you have all of these incidents that sort of spring forth from the Solway Firth Spaceman incident, the photo. And if one does just a little bit of digging, a minor bit of digging, you'll realize exactly what the Solway Firth Spaceman is. The Solway Firth Spaceman, the image over Elizabeth's head, is her mother looking away from her in the distance. The black of the shield is the base of the mother's skull. The elbow bends in the wrong direction of somebody facing towards you. They're facing away. Other photos of Elizabeth and her mother plainly show her wearing a dress very, very similar to the collars of the spacesuited man. They look a little bit different. This is an optical illusion. It's because the blue of the sky makes the blue of the dress seem a little bit white. But that doesn't discount the Men in Black sightings. That doesn't discount the filmed spacemen. Could it be that the entities trying to stop these launches, the spacesuited men, aren't as smart as we're giving them credit for? Somehow they saw this photo and made the same mistake we did for so long. Whenever you think about a lot of the UFO abduction cases, they don't seem that far ahead of us. Take away the space travel. Take away the incredible aeronautic feats that they're able to do. Really? There's not a lot of difference. The Betty and Barney Hill case pops almost immediately to mind. They did a test on Betty Hill. They called it a pregnancy test. We know that today is an amniocentesis. They weren't even smart enough to realize that Barney Hill had false teeth, manufactured replacement teeth. They were curious to Betty why her teeth weren't removable. Are we giving extraterrestrials more credit than they deserve? If they are extraterrestrials, I'm still up in the air about that. Interdimensionals, perhaps they're tulpas. I heard an amazing theory. I wish it was my own. It is not. Credit where credit is due. This is the theory of the hosts of Last Podcast on the Left, that Men in Black are actually tulpas, which are thought forms that are made solid. And they thrive off fear. They thrive off chaos. And they pick these tiny little nothing cases, like amazing UFO cases where it's strange creatures and fantastical feats and high strangeness. They very rarely get MIBs attached to them. No, it's like, I saw a light in the sky. And then all of a sudden the Men in Black are there because they don't want attention drawn away from them. They want all the fear. I think that's an amazing theory. I've had a theory for a long time that I'm currently doing some digging in. I've had a theory, and this is wild, this is strange, this is out there, but I've had this theory for a long time that Men in Black are actually reanimated corpses controlled by aliens. I'm trying to find cases of aliens that are grave robbing, of aliens that are stealing bodies. Why would you build a robot, an android that would look human, whenever you could attach a few wires to a dead body? Make it move around, make it speak, if you have that tech. A lot of cases say the men in black are pale. The men in black have, and I hate to use this word, like Asian features or mongoloid features. That their skin is pulled back very tight. That they have trouble moving. That they're stiff moving. Pale. That sounds like lack of blood circulation. Wide eyes. From the skin being pulled back in rictus. Stiff movements, rigor mortis. There are cases of people seeing wires going up the legs. That could be to send electrical impulses to the muscles that are dead. Because there's no brain to activate them anymore. There's no brain activity. There's a case too, Project Serpo, where supposedly a few soldiers went on a spacecraft after an alien contact and went to live on their home planet. And on the way there, one of these soldiers died. And the aliens took her body and turned it into a new creature. And the people were pissed. They didn't understand. But I mean, it makes sense in a gory sort of way, doesn't it? Why build a robot? Why disguise yourself as a human when there's plenty of other human bodies just lying in the dirt, ready to be used? It would explain the unusual questions. I mean, if you're disguised as something, might as well ask the questions at that point. I'm still trying to dig up evidence for my theory. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. This is going to sound really, really, really ridiculous, but I may have had a somewhat removed interaction with the men in black. Years and years and years ago, I interviewed a gentleman who claimed that he had a famous missing photo of an alien. At the time, and probably, if I'm being honest, to this day, I didn't believe him. Did not believe him one little bit. But he had a photo. I was willing to hear him out. I'll let anyone speak, really. But then he said there was a message hidden in the photo. It didn't take very long for not me, but my contacts to crack the message. Kind of blasé messages, what have you. But a few days later, my computer had stopped working correctly. I actually took it to the same person who decoded the message in this alien photo. By the way, don't try to look for that podcast, Off the Path. The person eventually messaged me and said he was afraid he would like to have it taken down. Out of respect, I did take it down, but not without saving a copy for myself. Where that copy is right now, I can tell you it's not in my house, and you'll understand why. There are several copies of it in several safe places. My friend, who is one of the most no, I'm going to edit that. The most intelligent person I know. Frighteningly intelligent. He looks at my non-functioning computer, and he goes, somebody was inside this. Somebody has disconnected your hard drive They did it quick. And then whenever they put it back together, they didn't push it the whole way. Were you in here? Were you messing around with the computer? I had not. As far as I knew, nobody had messed with my computer. But it was obvious that somebody had. It was disconnected. It had a clip, like a metal clip, to hold it in place. It would take a massively hard fall to dislodge that. The computer had not been moved in months. That's always stuck in the back of my head, doing research. Did I find something that I wasn't supposed to find? Or was this just a few entities that feed on fear looking for a meal? Van Meter, Iowa is a tiny, tiny little town. It's famous for exactly two things. A native of Van Meter is Bob Feller, National Baseball Hall of Fame pitcher. And in 1903, the town was besieged by a 9-foot-tall bat-like creature dubbed the Van Meter Visitor. The Van Meter Visitor is described as moving at immensely high speeds, letting off a powerful stench, and, even weirder, shooting blinding light from its horned head. Bullets didn't seem to have any impact on the creature. The townsfolk encountered it several times, fired at it a volley of shots, no effect at all. On the first night it was spotted, it was just doing simple flying across the building tops. Second night, it's spotted by both the town doctor and a bank cashier named Peter Dunn. He saw this thing land and take off. Peter Dunn goes over and makes a plaster cast of its 3-toed foot. Night 3, 3 nights in a row, a man spots the Van Meter Visitor atop a telephone pole. Another person sees it. He said it was hopping around like a kangaroo. And the local high school teacher said it was the devil. Some of the scared yet brave townsfolk follow this creature. And they see it fly into an abandoned coal mine. And they hear this noise from the mine. The Des Moines Daily News from October 3rd, 1903 has an article. Part of the article says, "Presently the noise opened up again, as though Satan and a regiment of imps were coming forth for battle." They see things come out of this cave. Now it's not just one. There's 2 of them, a larger one and a smaller one. But there is a flash of bright light, and it sailed away. And then it returns again in the morning. A lot of the townspeople had gathered with weapons to, quote, rid the earth of them. The article goes on to say, the reception they received would have sunk the Spanish fleet, but aside from unearthly noise and a peculiar odor, they didn't seem to mind it, but slowly descended the shaft of the old mine. Now, there are reports that the creature was never seen again. There are a few reports here and there. The last reported sighting of something that may be the Van Meter Visitor was back in 2010. It's kind of like Mothman. Nobody saw Mothman really after the Silver Bridge collapse, but a few people do. The thing that kind of grabbed my attention with this was the light, the blinding light from the head. If you go all the way over to the other side of the world, to New Guinea, They call this thing the demon flyer. In their language, they pronounce it ropin. This has kind of the look of a pterosaur. It might be a large bat. But this same creature produces light. It is bioluminescent. They think it's to catch fish. Even though fish does seem to be the ropin's main diet, there are reports of ropin digging up graves and eating dead bodies. Now, it could be chalked up to just myth. It could be chalked up to fancy, misidentification. But in 1935, biologist and entomologist Evelyn Cheeseman cited this. Evelyn Cheeseman, well respected in the scientific community. Let's talk about Cheeseman for a second. Between 1924 and 1952, Cheeseman went on 8 solo expeditions, alone, to the South Pacific. She has collected 70,000 specimens, which are all accompanied with sketches and notes. You want to see these? Go over to the Natural History Museum in London. The collections there, a large part of it is due to Evelyn Cheeseman. This is a woman who has discovered flowers. There are rare blue-flowered orchids, Dendrobium azurium. She's discovered them. This is not a whacked-out cryptozoologist. Not that there's anything wrong with a lot of the cryptozoologists out there. In Cheeseman's book, The Two Roads of Papua, she dismissed the lights that she saw as being from anything human-related. She believed that these lights were of the ropin. That's got to be worth something. Cheeseman saying that she believed these lights are from ropin strike the same type of weight as when Diane Fossey said on TV that she believed the Patterson-Gimlin footage was real. That's a lot of weight. That's something you just can't throw out. Our last tale. Very, very strange. It's one of those medical mysteries that's never really defined. It's never really understood. It's a one-off. It's a medical one-off. We're going to talk about Molly Fancher. Molly was a very normal, healthy girl until February 3rd, 1866. She looks at her parents and goes, I feel a bit dizzy. And then slumps to the floor of the kitchen in her mother's home. Now, the mother thought she had fainted, just grabbed some smelling salts, which were kind of common at the time. Ladies' undergarments were not exactly free and moving. Thank God that's different now. But smelling salts, they were a pretty common thing in the house because just the weight and the restrictiveness of women's clothing at the time would be enough to kind of knock some people to the ground. After half an hour, Molly's still not awake. So the mother summons Dr. Samuel F. Spear of Brooklyn. Dr. Spear goes, this is kind of like not really a coma, it's more of a trance-like state. And remember, this is not modern times. This is the 1880s. This is 1866. So the doctor just looked at her and went, she'll probably be all right by the morning. Days turned into weeks, months, and Molly Fancher remained in this strange, suspended animation. Dr. Spear investigated this. Her breathing had become very, very faint, almost non-existent. You know, I'm not one to believe in gang stalking. And I'm kind of glad, as a bit of an aside, I'm kind of glad that I'm not. Because it doesn't seem like trains drive by my house until I actually start recording. I don't think I'm going to take that out. Whenever I do recordings, it does seem like the trains tend to go by more frequently. This is, I think, the fourth one that's gone by since I started to record. I'm going to edit as best as I can the others out. But also loud cars going by, people yelling. All's quiet until I start to record. Now, Molly Fancher, like we said, her breath was barely existent. Her body was clammy, very corpse-like. Spear is smart enough to go, I don't understand what's going on. So he calls his associates, other men that he considers much more intelligent than himself. No one could figure it out. 9 years later, Molly Fancher is still in this trance coma, suspended animation, somewhere between life and death. During that time, she had eaten virtually nothing. In Dr. Spear's own words, he said she'd eaten about the amount a normal person would eat in 2 days. This case became a cause célèbre. Everybody wanted to come see Molly to see if they could cure her. And then, one afternoon in 1875, Dr. Spear asked several of his colleagues to come to a meeting at his office. He says, "Gentlemen," these are his own words, by the way. "Gentlemen, none of us has ever dealt with a case like this before. The physical condition of this young lady is baffling enough, but now I find that she is endowed with some sort of supernatural power." Now, there in attendance was Dr. Robert Ormiston, a Boston neurologist. He's very openly skeptical. And he stands and says, I imagine him slamming his hands down on the table, "Just what is this so-called supernatural power of Miss Fancher?" Spear invites them to meet with him a few days later at the bedside of Molly Fancher to witness for themselves. Now, Dr. Ormiston is invited. Dr. Spear is going to be there as well. Astronomer Dr. Richard Parkhurst, physician Dr. Willard Packer. He's a New York neurologist. They discuss the case at length. They study the charts. They noted the unnaturally weak pulse, the subnormal temperature, the very, very intermittent shallow breathing. Dr. Spear stands up and says, "Gentlemen, this girl can fully describe the dress and actions of persons hundreds of miles from here, just as they are this instant. Furthermore, she can read unopened letters and books." These are men of science. They agree to test this. They decide they're going to put a letter and they're going to place it inside a sealed envelope. And then they're going to place that sealed envelope inside another sealed envelope, inside another sealed envelope. And they're going to leave it in Dr. Spear's office, about 5 miles away. They get down close to Molly, and Dr. Parkhurst says, "Can you tell me what's in the envelope?" Molly whispers, "It is a letter in 3 sealed envelopes in Dr. Spear's office. Written on a sheet of paper are the words, 'Lincoln was shot by a crazed actor.'" Now, Spear and Parkhurst, Willard, Ormiston all race to Spear's office. They open the letter, and it contains the exact message. The man who took the letter was a personal friend of Dr. Willard, Peter Graham. The doctors then decide to ask Molly Fancher to describe the appearance and activities of a distant person. They went back to the Fancher home. They asked Molly, "Can you tell us the appearance and where Peter Graham's brother Frank is?" Miss Fancher starts to reply, even mentioning the missing button from his right sleeve. She even mentions that Frank Graham had left work earlier that day because he had a bad headache. They send a telegraph. It's all true. Molly Fancher laid in her trance-like condition for 46 years. Her parents were gone. Dr. Spear was long dead. In 1912, she finally regained consciousness. Her strange talent, her ailment, never explained. She had 3 years of life. And Molly passed away at the age of 73 in March of 1915. Thank you for joining us this week on Strange Pathways. Great news. We did finally get approved on Stitcher. If Stitcher is your go-to podcast place, great news. We are there. Come on over to Facebook. We're going to have photos pertaining to the tales that we've told today up on the Facebook page for you to enjoy. If you'd like to email me, you can do so at strangepathwaysmail@gmail.com. I have had a wonderful time here with you today. Take care of yourselves and each other.